Welcome. There's a few of you arriving, and which is lovely. There's quite a few people booked in for this session, which is wonderful. And so, hi Simon. A few housekeeping things. I'm going to try not to give all the important information just too rapidly, because there will be some people who will still be coming in. I'm Andy Salmon, and as well as being vicar of a small city centre church in Salford, on the edge of, well, it's actually part of Manchester city centre where we are really, but you wouldn't know that you'd move from Salford to Manchester when you cross the river. But anyway, that's where I'm based. But I'm now half-time working for Heart Edge as Northwest coordinator, which is very exciting. And so I get to talk to lots of different churches about lots of stuff and try and make things like this seminar happen. So you're very welcome here. Ben is doing some stuff behind the scenes, so he's going to be posting some stuff in the chat. You have to really multitask when you're on these sessions. Apparently I'm muted. How long have I been muted?
Few seconds.
Oh yeah, that's all right. Right, that was alarming. I must have muted myself by mistake. So we've still got people joining. That's fantastic. So some housekeeping rules. Do keep yourselves muted, because it's much easier for us to manage it if people are muted. What we will do is we're going to give some input. We are not a group of, fantastic, whizzy experts who are going to be telling you how to do everything. We are a group of people who've been making it up as we go along and discovering a few things on the way. And I've got a few ideas to share, and we're keen to hear your ideas. So what we're going to do is we're going to share some of our experience, and then we'll have a little bit of conversation about the going forward, and then we'll very much open it up to your questions and your comments. And if people want to comment, we might draw you in speaking if you're willing to. We will be recording this, so if anyone is nervous of appearing on screen, you'll have to mute your video if you really want to be sure, although mainly it'll be the people who are speaking who are on the video. But we have had a few requests from people who want to see this afterwards. So I think that's probably all the important stuff. Sorry, what I was going to say as well is in the chat, Ben has been posting some information about Heart Edge and so on. And one of the things that you might like to do is just say hello in the chat and sort of where you're from or something. That's always nice to see who everybody is. And one of the things that, if you've got useful links, share those in the chat, and at the end people can download the chat and save things like the important links. So that's it. You've started. Grand. So I've got a panel of experts. I just said that they're not experts. They don't think themselves as experts. I've got a panel of, I think, interesting people. I ought to say as well, unfortunately, Kath, who is London-based and part of the Nazareth community at St Martin in the Fields, and Heart Edge person for London, is ill and not able to be with us today. So we're missing out on Kath's input. Means we're a bit Manchester biased, I'm afraid. I did have a Londoner in there, and I'm sorry that we've lost her along the way. Anyway, we're going to fire away. So I've asked everyone to just say a few minutes about how they've coped once church buildings were closed. What have you been doing over the past year? How have you coped? And we're going to begin with Kim. You'll probably have to introduce who you are first as well, of course, Kim. So over to you, Kim.
Thanks very much, Andy. Yeah, so my name's Kim Lafferty, and at this present moment, I am the team vicar in the Farnworth, Kersley and Stoneclough team here in the Manchester Diocese. I say at this moment because by the end of May, beginning of June, I will be rector in East Perthshire as I'm moving to the Scottish Episcopal Church. So when Andy approached me, I was really pleased to hear that we were going to talk a bit about how we've coped. And the fact that we're not experts is hopefully going to give everybody a little bit of encouragement that how to do things and to continue things. When lockdown happened a year past in March, I live alone, and so I was immediately disconnected from everything and everybody. And just because I'm a vicar doesn't mean that I have the ability to cope with these things just like everybody else who lived alone. And the first thing I decided to do was I decided to host midday prayer on my church Facebook page. I then thought that we have 3 parishes in my team. So I then said, okay, I'll host midday prayer on one and evening prayer on one of the others, the 2 that I have the most involvement with. And I did that for a little while from the beginning of lockdown until Holy Week. And I did it right Monday to Friday. And it was a great way to connect with people. Slowly but surely, the numbers grew. People told other people about it. And we were very grateful to one of the church's website webmasters, because he took what I did for evening prayer and put it directly, linked it onto the church website as well, something I would have no idea of how to do. But he worked it out, he got some advice, and so people who didn't have Facebook could still see evening prayer. That kept going till, as I say, Holy Week last year. And I began to realise it wasn't sustainable to do 2 sessions every day, 5 days a week, as well as record a sermon for Sunday, or record myself doing a service in my kitchen for Sunday and get that out for a Sunday service. So during Holy Week, I went to evening prayer only, and decided that we would amalgamate and have a team Facebook page. So everybody could just come to the team page, and that would be where evening prayer was. At that point, the community grew, and we had people joining us from Scotland. That would be my family, obviously. It was but the only way they could get to see me on a regular basis, so it was lovely for them. But we also had people joining us from other places. I had a person who's been part of the community from Malaysia, who used to go to St. Stephen's Church, my main church, and the local St. Stephen's Primary School, and must have found us because of that. We've kept that evening prayer has kept going Monday to Thursday, because I resumed taking a day off, which I thought was probably a good plan. It was very easy in lockdown to lose sight of all of those things, days off, what day of the week it was, and everything else. And doing the evening prayer actually helped me to be grounded. And that then it meant that I was able to be the pastor that the people needed in that situation. The joy of leading the evening prayer for me was that I could sing the songs I liked. I didn't have to go with what the organist had chosen on a Sunday, which was really wonderful. And I would play my guitar and sing, not brilliantly. I'm no mean musician, but I can play and accompany myself, and nobody's there to tell you you're not doing a good job. The strangest thing of all was seeing yourself. I mean, it's like right now as I'm talking, all I see is my head. And one of the things I learned during lockdown was to not see me, but to actually see the people I was talking to. I did it all through the power of a phone. That was all I used. I didn't have a camera. I still don't have a camera. I just use my phone on initially propped up, and then I treated myself to a selfie stick, and that made a big difference. It meant it wasn't wobbling about all the time. So that's continued, and we've kept doing evening prayer right up until March this year. And that community has kept in contact. The other thing that we've done is coffee and chat on a Sunday after the YouTube service. So I would host a Zoom coffee and chat. Everybody would have their own coffee, their own comfy chair, and we'd all sit around and chat together. And that's also at the moment that's still going on. But as things are opening up, that less people are coming to coffee and chat because they can now go out and have a coffee outside somewhere, which is coming to a natural end. I feel, and I think that's possibly the right thing that's happening. So that's a summary of what I've done. Very low tech, but just connecting with not just my own congregations, but with other people as well, and being a presence through that and sharing Christ's love through that as well.
Thank you so much, Kim, for that. That was great. One of the things that strikes me about Kim, which you'll realise by just listening to her, is that Kim has a very sort of natural, inclusive kind of style, a style that draws people in, and I think a warmth. And I think you've really used that to advantage, Kim, on your Facebook evening prayer and stuff. And that's great to see the way people have been keeping in touch with each other through you as well, haven't they? I'm going to bring in Bill, and Bill can introduce himself and tell us a bit about how what you've been doing.
Thanks, Andy. I'm Bill Bravener. I'm a vicar in Stockton-on-Tees, which is on Teesside, as the name suggests, and just in Durham Diocese. My neighbours are in York Diocese. And I'm also the Diocesan Disability Advisor for Durham Diocese and do various things with buildings. I'm on the Church Buildings Council nationally, so things about installing things in buildings come my way quite a bit. But our experience, and I should just say, actually, I mean, Andy said none of us are experts, but if you define expert the way one of my colleagues does, he says it comes from two words, ex meaning out of, and spurt meaning pause uncontrollably. So he says, when I preach, I'm definitely an expert. So you can take that any way you want to. Oh, and there he is texting me. When we started with lockdown at the very beginning, I think what we did, probably naively, because none of us had really been involved in live streaming very much before, was we tried to do everything. So from the beginning, we tried to do 4 daily offices every day, which is actually more than we would have done before lockdown. We used to say morning and evening prayer, but not midday prayer and compline. But we tried to do 4 offices to really try and keep people in touch, and a Sunday Eucharist, which in the beginning was from my study. And fairly soon, that became quite a lot to sustain. Like Kim was saying, you know, I'm fortunate that I've got a curate, I've got some retired colleagues, so we could share the load a little bit, but it still became quite a heavy burden to bear if anything else was going on. And I think when we got to the summer and lockdown was easing a little bit, we took the opportunity at that point to say, look, we'll stop doing some of the things that we're doing every day. We'll point people to other things that are on offer, like the Church of England's daily prayer app and things like that. And we'll encourage people to keep praying, but we'll recognize what capacity we have. So that was our first big lesson, really. Apart from the very initial lesson of the fact that we could do this, the lesson was to pace ourselves. We were in this for the long haul, and we couldn't go mad. So as we began to come out of lockdown, that's what we did. And then, of course, it all got tightened up again, and we ended up going back into lockdowns, and had very much been thinking that it was no good just having one person on screen, either leading an entire Eucharist or leading an entire office as a talking head. We needed more participation than that. So we'd been considering how we might do that. We tried using Zoom, but people weren't keen. A lot of the people who were participating didn't want to come onto Zoom. They didn't want the interactive thing. They didn't want the cacophony of noise. They wanted something that they could effectively watch and be still with. So they didn't want that level of Zoom where we could actually have different people taking part. We had to think again. And so what we did was, certainly for our Sunday Eucharists, we started to get people to pre-record different bits of the service, the lessons, the prayers, etc., etc. And I used the video package on my computer to put them together into a kind of nice video that we then posted on a Sunday morning for people to watch all together. And we made that a YouTube premiere so that everybody could access it at the same time and have that common experience. People absolutely loved that. They loved it partly because there was a bit more production to it than just filming someone with an iPhone. We could put words up on the screen, we could do all sorts of different things. And we got better and better at doing that as time went on, to the point when, as we were able to go back into the building, people were a little bit disappointed that we were just back to having the service filmed with an iPhone rather than all this nice production and all these pictures and all these words and things. And that was an interesting problem to have, that people would have preferred a pre-recorded thing to a live thing. And as we've gone in and out of lockdown a few times, we've learned from that and kind of refined what we do. But we're still in the position, being in the building, of basically just doing it with an iPhone. I've got my son, who knows a little bit about filming and things, who operates the camera so he can move it around and he can focus on things, and he can he can zoom in and zoom out and all the rest of it. And he's just telling me he's going to work, so I'll see you later, son. So it's better than just having a static camera that doesn't do anything, but we need more. So we're in the process of trying to find the funding to install a professional system in the church building, because we know that we're going to be live streaming forever and a day now. We're never going to stop that. But I've also found, through some other work we do with refugees, that I can access a small grant for training resources. And one of the things that the funder has said is portable cameras and what have you, so we can live stream lessons in English to the refugees and asylum seekers, is something they would support. So hopefully we'll have a kind of semi-professional system funded through a different route that we can use for worship on Sundays as well. So the big takeaways for me was we started too fast. We tried to do too much. We were able to do more when we weren't live, and that was an interesting lesson. And we've really hit the limitations of what we can do with an iPhone. But one last point is simply to say, it's very clear to me and very obvious to me that when we are live streaming from church and we've got people in the building, but we have the camera running as well, we have to engage the people that are through that camera lens and speak to them and let them know that they're there, and not just let them watch what's happening with the people who are really part of the service because they're in the building. And that hybrid thing is, it's a new thing to learn, and it's a new thing to remember. And I'm wondering how to kind of do something around the camera, whether it's putting a bright orange wig on the person who's operating the camera or something, to keep reminding me to talk to the camera as well as the people who are present. And I've probably gone on for far too long, but that's kind of where we're at now.
That's a great introduction. Thanks so much, Bill. Really interesting stuff there. And I'm gonna hand over now to Eve, who's not working in a parish, but got a diocesan job. But you'll tell us about that, Eve.
Yeah, hello. Andy and I are long-term colleagues. We work together at the Diocese of Manchester, and I'm the digital officer at the Diocese of Manchester. I obviously also attend a church, and I attend St Mary's, Nantwich, which is in the Chester Diocese, and I am a chorister there. So that's been a whole different experience, recording pieces of music from my attic room, which is where I spend my days now. And having to get to grips with new pieces of music when I don't have a piano at home whatsoever. So playing my alto parts on the tiny keyboard on my phone and trying to learn the music that way. Very different experience. But my role as the digital officer at the Diocese of Manchester has been a post that has existed for 3 years now, and I was the first person into that role, and feel very lucky to have been able to sort of create the role around what's been needed in Manchester at the time. I used to spend a lot of time training people to get to grips with social media and church websites, a church near you. And to be fair, there was a lot of convincing people that it was something that was worth doing in the early days. And I had quite a bit of pushback when I first started, when I offered, would anyone like any support with social media? There was a fair few people being like, we are never going to use social media. And here we all are. So my role has changed quite a bit in the last year. And we've really gone from running the social media accounts for the diocese and doing bits of training with people within the parishes where it was needed, to trying to fight fires initially when the lockdowns initially happened. And we've gone about that in a few different ways. So a way that I've found incredibly helpful for trying to help as many people as possible, being just the one person that I am, has been to have a Facebook group. And I set it up before lockdown. It's called the Digital Support Group, and I run it out of the Diocese of Manchester Facebook page. And actually, anybody who is on this call today is welcome to join it. It's not exclusive to the Diocese of Manchester, it's just where we run it from. And that group grew from about 100 or so people that had been on my training, which was from March last year, to now we've got over 500 members of that group, and it's very much a self-sustaining group. And if people have got a problem with something, either technical or about content, social media, online worship, whatever it be, people can ask the question in the group, and either I can help find the right person to answer that question, or help them myself, or the group just pile on in with great advice, and it's been a really brilliant source. So I would advise, because I've seen all these people popping up in the chat from all different parts of the country, have a look and see if your diocese runs something similar, because I know other dioceses do have groups that that you can join, or if not, you'd be more than welcome to join the Diocese of Manchester group, and I can put that link in the chat later on. But I just wanted to say, really, as sort of an introduction to what I've got to talk about today, is that I'm just incredibly impressed by what I've seen churches attempt and achieve over the last year. We've had churches and clergy people and lay people take on responsibilities that they never thought was possible. So whatever you have managed to do this year, whatever you've got out there, what you are helping people in such an important way, and in a way that a lot of us never thought we could actually do. And you know, sometimes I felt with my job before that I was fighting a bit of a uphill battle, a bit of a losing battle with people's willingness to embrace the digital world. But actually this year has been incredible, and what people have achieved is absolutely astonishing. So before we go on to what are we going to do now, which is what we're going to talk about for the rest of this afternoon, I think it's a really important time to take a look back at what you've done in this last year and what your church has done, how you've managed to keep your parish going over this time, and just really kind of understand the magnitude of what that is, because I think it's really impressive, and we shouldn't take for granted how hard it's been for everybody, whether or not you've been directly affected by COVID or some of the other negative impacts of the lockdowns. Learning this kind of stuff and actually using it to help people is incredibly difficult, and I just think it's amazing what people have done.
Thanks so much, Eve. Brilliant. And I can see somebody's already put the link to that Facebook group in there, in the chat. I'd also, in the interests of a non-Manchester bias, ought to point out that there's a Facebook group that I belong to as well called Techno Clergy. And Techno Clergy is quite a good Facebook group. Somebody else might know that one. And there's lots of tech advice on there. And some, you know, there's lots of advice that you can tap into out there. I'm going to just say briefly a bit about what our experience was at Sacred Trinity Church. And then I'm going to open the discussion up a bit more. So at Sacred Trinity, our experience was not so different. I started doing, I mean, I'm half-time at the church, and started doing morning prayer on Facebook Live and Zoom 5 days a week, and kept that going for quite a while, but it wasn't really sustainable as a half-timer as well. So we now do morning prayer twice a week. We encourage people to pray at other times as well, but we're publicly doing that twice a week. We had a bit of a panic when first lockdown first happened. I looked around, I sought the advice of others, and you know, we managed to pick out Zoom. That's what we did. So we started that very first Sunday of lockdown, all that time ago. We met together on Zoom, and there was a palpable relief amongst people that they could, you know, that we were here for each other, that they could connect. And I think we've just kept going with Zoom. It's reasonably popular. We're only a small church, but there's about 30 people on Zoom each week. We also, though, decided, a bit like Bill's video, we created a short video so that those who weren't going to join us in Zoom could access something of the service on a Sunday. So we keep it to 20 minutes because I feel like attention spans are not great, and 20 minutes is enough for some people, and that goes out on Facebook, on YouTube, on Instagram each week. So that's quite an undertaking, actually. I mean, we put our sermon on there, we get a member of the congregation to do the reading, we get a member of the congregation to do the prayers, and our director of music actually has been brilliant, and he's recorded songs for us to sing along to on Zoom each week, and we usually use one of those in the video, along with images. Like, often it's just photos of the parish, because there are some people who don't live in the parish. Quite a few of ours don't live in the parish, and they're not seeing it, so we put it out in the video, so people can you know, remember what it's like, or in our case, city centre, see how it's changed in the last few months, which has been quite a lot. So that's some of what we've done. We've gone back into the building now on a Sunday evening, but our main service is still on Zoom. We're a small building, so we would not get, I mean, we get 30 people on Zoom. We wouldn't be able to fit 30 people in the building, keeping 2 meters distance, because it's only a small building. So we will very soon go back into the building on a Sunday morning. What do I do with the quarter of my congregation who most of them have lived locally, but there's a quarter of them that do not live locally? Some of them live in other countries. What do I do with them? Do I still feel an obligation to them? Do I still connect with them? Do I just trust that they'll find somewhere else, which they might do? Or do I do the blended approach that Bill has talked about so well? For us, on a Sunday evening, we're at the moment live streaming that, and we live stream just simply using an iPhone at the front. Because it's evening prayer, and most of the action, all of the action really, is from the lectern. So, and it's half an hour long. It feels like that's sustainable. We can, and actually the audio quality is not bad, even for the bits of organ playing and so on. We have a bit of instrumental music as well, and it works okay. Evening service in that format, live streamed from a phone, works fine. The challenge I've got is, what do I do about a Eucharist which has a lot more happening in different spaces, a lot more dead time, because there's sort of waiting while John walks up to the lectern to do the reading, waiting while John walks away from the lectern to sit down. There's a lot of, it's not as immediate, really. So I still remain to be convinced that a Sunday morning Eucharist is going to work live streamed, but I'm here to listen. So I wonder whether at this point I might, draw in the others first of all. So we want to hear your questions in the chat. And I'm going to try and keep an eye on the chat and keep talking. But Bill, Eve, or Kim? Well, let's go back to Kim because you started, Kim. What's your sense of what might happen now going forward? How do we return to the building and keep people connected online, but keep it all manageable?
Thanks, Andy. That's a really big question. And when you work as part of a team, as I do, I mean, it's a team of two, but it's still a team. Our Sunday service recording part of our team has jumped ship and gone to another parish. So we've lost the one who's done all the Sundays for us all through lockdown, left. And of course, because he'd done them all, neither myself or my colleague had really sort of taken on board learning how to do it. So that's proven to be quite tricky at times. I obviously, it's difficult for me to actually say what's going to happen because I'm moving. So that makes things a bit trickier as well. But all my evening prayer people are saying, when you go to Scotland and you do evening prayer, can we join you there? And I noticed somebody said in the chat about the informality of it. I mean, when I do evening prayer, I say hello to every name that comes up on the screen as they arrive. I welcome them all in. And I think it's that sense of connection. I mean, you were saying about my natural, that's who I am. I will say hello to everybody. And I know that's not everybody. So it's just me. That's my colleague is very different. He's much more focused on the sacramental, and that's his skill and that's his gifting. That's the way he looks at things. So we complement one another because I kind of do the pastoral side and he does the sacramental side, and between us we fit together. I feel that going forward, yes, I am moving, but I think that very quickly after I move, because in Scotland they're limited in the church buildings to a maximum of 50, regardless of the size of the building. So, we have one of our churches, we could probably get 100 people in socially distanced because it's got a gallery, but we won't be allowed. We're only allowed 50. So I'm going to be going to somewhere where they've not had a digital involvement, and I'm going to be trying to encourage them by starting something maybe just once a week and going around and putting letters through people's doors to explain how to do it. And I think that is a very important thing to not underestimate how terrifying it is for people. Even now, after a whole year of being locked away from families, it's still really terrifying for some of my folk to think about coming onto an online something, whatever way it might be. And I think that we mustn't denigrate that sense of fear that especially older people have of the internet as a whole, never mind Zoom or Facebook. So it's really important to find ways to be inclusive of them. And as it is, I mean, I've got a basic crib sheet that I give out for how to join Zoom. And I have given it out numerous times because we have some people who seem to lose it regularly and still can't manage to get in. I spend a lot of time on mute at the beginning of things while I get somebody else in. It's about being patient and about being kind to people, not expecting them to know just because I know how to do it. Don't expect somebody else to know. And just be there and be willing to just share what you do know, and also let them know that you're not an expert either. Mute yourself and unmute yourself and put yourself out of the room. And, I've done all of those things while leading things. So I think it helps people to realize that we're all learning this together.
Thank you. Yeah. One of the one of the questions there is about, well, oh, sorry, I ought to point out that somebody's commented that the rules in Scotland have changed today, Kim.
Oh,
You might want to check
that's exciting.
that. Yeah. But Terry's pointed that out. One of the questions down there is about how in churches where there's no Wi-Fi and there's no 4G, how do you, so obviously if you, I mean, it is a possibility that you could put those things in maybe, and there's going to be a cost to that, and in some places that might be really difficult to do. But of course, I'm thinking that one of my thoughts is that producing my 20-minute video might be a way of keeping it, almost keeping it simple. I mean, so yeah, Eve wants to chip in. Go on, Eve.
I'd just like to, firstly, I think Kim's live evening services are marvellous, and I just think she does a fab job. So anybody who's ever at a loss of an evening should go for it and join that service. But I think it's really important to remember that online, the online provision that we provide doesn't necessarily have to just be the worship. I think what we've really focused on for the last year has been, how do we get worship to people? And as the country, fingers crossed, continues to unlock safely, we need to find this balance for our worship, certainly between how we're serving people online and also in person. But also we need to think about what's the best balance to strike between the content that we share that is worship based, and then, as Kim said, pastoral and potentially discipling as well. So we don't, if you don't have great Wi-Fi or even decent 4G in your church building, that's not necessarily the end of the world. I think it's a real shame that we don't have Kath here to talk about some of the things that have been going on at St. Martin's in the Field, because I know that they have been doing live prayer walking on a Saturday morning. I can't give too many details about it because I don't know that much about it, but they've bought one of those gimbal things and you attach your phone and you walk around and you pray on the walk. Now, you don't have to be in your church building to share worship. You can be out and about, as we've very much discovered. You can be in your homes, but there's lots of opportunities to use different spaces for worship. But then it's about thinking, right, so we've gathered these people to us, like Andy said, from potentially different parts of the country, different parts of the world, sometimes just new people from within our parishes. How are we going to make sure that they are nourished and properly tended to without using our online platforms if they can't necessarily get to our buildings? Of course, there are other reasons people can't get to our buildings. They may be a student and live in two different places. They may have a disability or be living in a care home or not be able to get out and about of their own free will. There's lots of different reasons why people might not be able to attend still in the old-fashioned sense of the word. So how are we going to think about our social media presence, our websites? How are we using those to make sure that we're giving people a full experience from our church and making sure that we are serving people all the way through the week and not just with our worship? I think that's a really worthwhile question to ask.
Wow, yeah, and there's some fantastic contributions coming in the chat and some of the creative things that people are doing. And my fear with all of this is that we've got to somehow keep it manageable. Bill, do you want to chip in at all on any of this?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the that was the point I was going to make, really, was manageability. One of the things about the digital side of things is it can take up an enormous amount of time. And for me, when I was producing the pre-recorded service, because I wanted it to be the best it could be and have some reasonably good production value, I was probably using a whole day a week to produce that service. And I remember saying to my wife, you know, it's a lot less effort just to turn up at church and do the mass, which it is. But it's a different kind of ministry and it reaches lots of people through those hours of effort that you can put in. So it is worth it. And you obviously you've got to balance that. I think in terms of the Wi-Fi versus 4G thing, when you don't have a very good signal, we suffered from that. And in some ways we still do. We've kind of upgraded the Wi-Fi a bit when it works. And there are days where the live stream is pretty poor quality, but later on, Facebook does something to it and the video's better if you watch it later in the day. I don't quite know how that works, but there you go. But you can film the service live and then upload it later. If the Wi-Fi in the building isn't any good, film it live, upload it when you get home, and people can know that that's why you've done that. They'll have to join in with it later, or pre-record one the day before and upload it at the same time as you're going to be live in church for people to watch as a preview. And obviously, it won't be the same service, but they can participate in worship at the same time. And it depends which of those is better. And for some people, and again, this takes up a bit more time, people who really aren't online and really don't want to be online, you can put the recording that you've made onto a DVD if you've got a DVD burner, and actually physically send them or give them a DVD that they can watch. That's a little bit more wasteful of DVDs and plastic and all the rest of it, but it might work for some people. And I think the point Eve made as well is really important. If the signal in your church building isn't very good, well, why not live stream things from elsewhere? Why not live stream from somewhere, maybe the house or whatever, which does have decent Wi-Fi, and live stream Bible studies or teaching or reflections or, you know, daily offices or whatever it happens to be, so that there are things going on in that overall Christian journey. So I think the big thing for me over this past year has been trying to get my head out of the box and getting away from feeling like we just have to film what we've always done. So now we're a fantastic online church because we're broadcasting what we've always done. I've been involved in the disability world long enough to know that online church is very much different from just having a window into what's going on in the building. It's about forming community and being disciples together, you know, every day. And there's lots and lots of ways of doing that. And some of the best things I've done over the past year and in the years previously have been conversations on Twitter and Facebook about issues. And that's been better than listening to a person preach and say what they think. It's things have emerged from within that. So be imaginative and do what you can. Don't beat yourself up about what you can't.
Brilliant. Yeah. Eve wants to come in.
Sorry, I'm put my hand up like we're at school. Just following on from what Bill said there, I think there's also a good question to ask yourself: why are we doing this particular thing? Is it worth it? Is there enough people that are wanting this from us? Before I worked for the church, I used to work for British Cycling, and when live streaming on Facebook became a thing a couple of years ago, a lot of the videos that they wanted us to do were live just because we could. And trouble is, we all work 9 to 5, and most cycling fans also work 9 to 5, and nobody was watching our videos going out. Whereas if we scheduled them to go out at a particular time when we knew people were free, then we could pre-record something and send it out at a time when we knew our audience would be online. So we quickly stopped doing live streaming for the sake of it. And I think Bill's absolutely right. If you can record a service that went out live and then just pop it on later on, that will become the new time that people watch your service, and that can be a really great thing. Yeah, there's lots we can talk about around manageability, but I know Bill's got his hand up, so I'll
Now, it was just, I mean, one of the things that we did, which was around doing something different, was for Holy Week. We got lots of our people who work with toddlers and Sunday school and things like that. We got them each to record a little video, like a few minutes long, literally, telling one of the stories of Holy Week. And we did it with little figures, you know, little sort of knitted figures, but you could do it in any sort of way. But each of them, different voices, told one of the stories of Palm Sunday or Maundy Thursday or whatever it happens to be, in a very sort of toddler-friendly way, child-friendly way. And we put all of those videos up on YouTube and produced a little booklet and each page had something about, this is the story for today, you can watch it, and a QR code to go and find the YouTube video, which is very easy to make. And then some activities that the toddlers could do after having watched the story. And we did that as a PDF and sent it to all the people we know about through all of our different children's work. We did paper copies for those who didn't have email and got them sent. And the response was fantastic. And actually, for each person who was involved, there was probably half an hour's effort to produce a video on their phone and send it to me. But as a team of about 12 people, we produced something that had a massive impact. So that's the other lesson I've learned from all lockdown, is it doesn't all have to be me. And hallelujah to that.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. Couple of thoughts from me. One is that we have a fortnightly Bible study, and that after initially a pause when we went into lockdown, we thought, well, no, we'll Zoom church on a Sunday works. Let's try the Bible study, and that's working really well. And we're thinking that we might actually just keep that as an online thing. So we might start something else up in the building, but keep the Bible study as a Zoom thing, because it kind of works well, really, there. We just another thought is that we need to be thinking as well about how, as churches, we are missional in our outreach, in our digital communication, as well as our more traditional communication. So a lot of our emphasis in early days of lockdown, a lot of churches were just panicking about how do we keep in touch with our congregation. And what we've actually found is that in some ways we've expanded a little bit, because people have connected to us that we weren't connected to before. But how can we do more of that is a question I've got. How can we tap into the sort of local groups that are digitally online, and make connections, make new connections, and gently share the gospel with people, whether it's just saying, sorry to see that. I remember on one occasion, just a group that I'm part of, somebody was sharing the fact that their van had been nicked, and you just think, I'm really sorry to hear that. We'll keep you in our prayers. Also, it's like there's ways in which we can connect online, and I think we mustn't forget the missional side of it. I'm going to bring in Bill, and I'm going to see if Kim, who's holding back, has anything else to say. But Bill, go on, you've got your hand up.
Just a really quick comment on that, Andy. In terms of being part of community Facebook groups or WhatsApp groups or whatever it is that happens to be online, is it builds relationship if we're on there and we're not always just saying, oh, there's a faith angle to this, or oh, why don't you come to church, or oh, we've got a service on. That we show, like we would in any other way, we're engaged in community life, we're bothered about community issues, we have something to say as good neighbors who just happen to be Christians.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's why I say gently as well, not preachy, but just being part of the community. Kim, have you got anything you want to?
Yeah, I was just thinking about what you were just saying about sort of engaging with other groups. I'm part of a group called Lancashire Lasses. Now you can tell by my accent I'm not a Lancashire lass, but it kind of grew out of the local WI group that couldn't meet. Then they went online, and then it kind of grew from that into something else. So they still have this local WI, but this is separate. And they do the sort of typical, have somebody come and do a talk, show us a craft, but what they did do was they would send out or email out things for us to do together online. And through that, one of the ladies who goes to that started to come to evening prayer. Now, at no point in Lancashire Lasses did I say, I was introduced as the vicar. I think they did that really quickly at the beginning, so that that the language was appropriate for the vicar being there, which just cracks me up. I don't care how people talk or the language they use. It's not, as long as they're not taking God's name in vain. That's the only thing I really get upset about. And they were great. And yeah, as I say, I never actually spoke about my faith. I just was me. And I think sometimes that's all it takes, is to just be ourselves. Because if faith is part of who we are, then we don't always need to speak it. People can hear it in the way we react to the things they share with us. I can't help myself but say, I'll pray for you, because it's what I do. And it's nothing to do with being a vicar. It's what I've always done. It's just part of who I am. And I think sometimes we get so afraid of making sure we share the gospel that we forget to share ourselves. And I think that's even more important online in some ways than it is in a person-to-person context. You need to just share yourself. That can be really scary, but it can also open doors in ways you would never imagine. I've had online conversations with people in this past 14, 15 months that I don't think I've ever had with people in the 5 years before that. So yeah, it really does open up doors.
Brilliant. Thank you. And I'm just trying to keep an eye on the chat, and we've got, is it Kate's been sharing some interesting resources from the Methodist Church there, which definitely look worth checking out. Karen there running various Bible study groups on Zoom and WhatsApp. Sounds very impressive. Terry, I wonder, Terry's got a comment there about the feel of speaking, the difference of speaking directly to camera and filming a service from the back. I don't know whether, Terry, do you want to come on sort of screen and sort of tell us what your thoughts are there? Don't know how possible that is.
So I live in Scotland, and we have been pre-recording for a year and continue to do so, even though we are now in person, because we are one of those churches without good internet access in the building, despite being a town center church. And with a phone mast in the tower, and we still cannot live stream from that building for love nor money. But it doesn't feel the same, right? So people who have joined us online who would never have come in the church building before, I have significant concerns about switching to recording the service that's happening in person, because those people don't have a connection to the building, and so they don't want to see the building and the backs of people's heads. Like, they have gotten used to seeing me and whatever background I have carefully managed, and or whatever location I have chosen to be in, and speaking straight down the camera to them, which is something you would not get if you were watching. I mean, it just feels like it would feel like being a spectator in something you're not a part of, as opposed to being engaged in something that's directly to you. So if anyone has ideas about that, I'm here for them, because I don't think that it will be sustainable in the long term to, like, when I'm allowed to do everything else again, school chaplaincy and hospitals and visits and all of that, like, to do all of that and the pre-recording is probably a little much. So
that's a real challenge, but I think gets to the heart of one of the struggles that we're going to have, really. Eve wants to chip in.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question, Terry, and something that I think, well, Andy and I have actually talked about this to each other before, which is about working out what is going to be physically possible for each individual church. Is going to be really difficult, and I think a way to start that is to go to the people themselves and ask the questions. So I know that Andy has regularly surveyed his congregation, be it newcomers, be it the people that have been attending for donkey's years, and just said, what's working for you? What is it that you want us to keep doing? And I think that's a really good place to start, and start from that place of honesty where you say, listen, this is going to be really difficult for us to keep working this way, and this is the reason why. However, we can fit in certain different types of things if there is a desire for it, and if those people are willing to kind of try new things maybe. And it's a case of sort of really having that conversation and being open and honest with your congregations, whether they be in building congregations or online congregations, and also looking for sustainable ways to make that happen. So if there are people that are really passionately enjoying pre-recorded one-to-one services like this, then maybe it's time to start putting out feelers to co-opt people into supporting that. I don't know if you're a layperson, if you're ordained, but I'm a layperson and I can lead sessions, services of the word, that kind of thing. Are there people that can start to contribute, build up a bit of confidence by bringing them in, maybe to do readings to start with, and then getting them involved that way? In our diocese, we have a network of people called the ALMs, the authorised lay ministers, and I think that's something that dioceses all call different things, don't they? But they're a great resource to help with these kind of services. And I think really it's about stepping back at this stage and looking at, right, so this is what we're currently running, but this is all the stuff that's coming down the track that we're going to have to go back to, like you say, the children's ministry, the chaplaincy. How are we going to manage it? And I think people really need to know what the pressures on you as a church leader are, and understand that there has to be some balance. And if you can survey people, ask those sort of questions, let people know that these discussions are being had, you can really get some good feedback into what's needed from people. Maybe start making connections with the building by recording one of your services in the building itself, so that you've got that kind of starting to make the connections. Maybe invite them to other things and almost kind of wean them into different areas of your church's life. There's loads of different options, but I think starting by just having that conversation with people and just being really honest, because we're all just people, aren't we? We can only do so much with a certain amount of time that we've got. Yeah, ask the questions and see where you go.
I think it's worth saying, I'll bring in Bill in a minute, but it's worth saying, Carol's pointed out that it's sometimes hard to know who it is that's watching, and it's hard to do a survey of those, and I admit that, we don't know who is engaged with us online often, and it is hard to ask the questions, but we've at least got to make an effort to, I think, work out what it is that people are after. And I feel like we all need to, in a sense, COVID has thrown up into the air so much of our program, of what we've been doing. And my guess is that some of the things aren't going to start up again. And maybe we need to think about priorities and time, and let's maybe not doing that thing that might have actually come to the end of its natural life. I'd be interested in the chat if people have got a sense of, is their weekly program going to change quite a bit? Because I don't think we should just be saying, what was it we were doing 18 months ago, let's start it all up again. Bill, you wanted to chip in.
Yeah, just following on from really that and what Eve was saying, and also what Fiona put in the chat about asking people what's working, what's not working, how can we improve, etc. One of the things that this whole experience has given us is the opportunity to have a conversation about our worship and our more general church life, so that we can talk to people about what is it that we do in worship that really works, that really feeds us, that really helps us to be God's church, and nourishes our discipleship. And if you'd said to me 2 years ago that I'd have the opportunity where everybody wants to have a conversation about how worship can be better and how worship can be more nourishing, I'd have taken your arm off. So let's not lose sight of the opportunity this gives us to have that conversation with people about what's worship for, what's it doing for us, what are we doing within it, how can we improve it, and that can lead into all sorts of conversations about our Christian faith and our Christian life anyway.
I muted myself and then started talking. A classic mistake. I thought Kim was wanting to chip in then. I realised no, she's got a phone call. And do throw in any more questions. We won't keep going forever on this, but have you got any questions that you want to ask us? Lorraine says we're using the idea of abandon, amend, adopt. That sounds useful. Yeah, you got any further thoughts, Eve?
Yeah, I think abandon, amend, adopt is a lot neater than the way I've always put it, which is if it isn't working, just ditch it. Which is definitely a social media technique I would recommend. I think the beauty of social media is that much more passing. It disappears. Whereas people will remember maybe a disastrous thing that you attempted to do in the church building that just didn't come off. Whereas if you try something new out online, it's much less likely to be an absolute disaster. And it can, if it's something that doesn't really work, then you can just sort of gently let it go. But I absolutely agree with Bill and Andy. There has to be an opportunity to sort of just really assess where we are now and not be afraid to have those difficult conversations. And they may be with clergy, they may be with the PCC. It may be that you need to ask your families and young people and children, what is it that you want out of coming to our church? Have we been serving you well in the past? How has it been throughout the pandemic? I know I keep saying it, but really it's just these conversations with different groups that we come into contact with. And we can use the power of digital to ask those questions if we don't have the opportunity to do it face to face. Facebook polls are very good. You can ask polls during Zoom services, like we're currently in now. And you can send around survey monkeys to your survey monkeys, not people, monkeys with surveys, but using survey technology and send that out in your email connections with people as well. So just really taking the opportunity now to to maybe wipe the slate clean and what do we love, what do we treasure, keep that. What works pretty well, work on that. What's diabolical and nobody enjoys, ditch it.
Brilliant. Survey Monkey is very usable. Also Google Forms, and especially if you've got G Suite for free as a registered charity. We during lockdown, just prior to lockdown, actually, we went through the process of registering with the Charity Commission. Even though we're not big enough and got enough income to make us have to, we still did it. And we've got G Suite for free from Google and Microsoft 365 for free because we're a registered charity. So worth getting. And so I used the Google Forms for surveys now. So I'm just looking at all these comments. Kate given us lots of good links to have a look at. Yes, I don't. Rachel's saying that you don't need to be registered. There are ways you can get. We just found it a lot easier to get hold of some stuff when we registered with the Charity Commission. But I'm kind of feeling like we've said we can go up till 3:30, but I don't want to sort of force you all to keep listening to us until then if we're running out of steam. Does anyone want to ask any further questions of us? Anyone got any ideas how to bring their families and children in gently? Do you mean, Carol, into the church building or in to the online sort of stuff? I'm not sure. Into meeting together, yeah. I mean, one of the things I think that a lot of churches have found is that it's actually families that are perhaps least turning up at church, and that's quite a worry. But Bill,
Yeah, one of the things we've done just in the last month or two, since it's been possible, is we've started to have things for our preschoolers, obviously, which involves their parents and what have you as well, outside. As the weather's getting a bit better, we can meet in the church garden, which we're fortunate to have, or we can meet in the park or whatever it happens to be, just for a very short kind of 20 minutes together. And it keeps them in touch. We've been on Zoom for a year, and actually being able to come back together and see their friends and what have you and have a bit of a run around is really doing them well. And we began that by having like a treasure hunt in the park. We hid stones painted with little sort of biblical characters or whatever, or symbols, around in the park, and just got the families to go and find them, and made sure everything we did was COVID compliant, made sure everything we did was, you know, in kind of in keeping with what we're allowed to do now. But as we're coming out of lockdown, and as the weather's getting warmer and warmer, the congregation's growing for that. So when we're not in the building, we'll go in the building if we need to, if it's raining. But they love being outside, and they love, it's like having a picnic every week.
wonderful. And that reminds me, talking of picnics, that reminds me of the fact that we're trying to think about how we might give people an incentive to come back to the building, because actually, you know, there is a lot of nervousness still about, and a lot of people have lost the habit. And I think we do need to think about how we can celebrate being back, or I think who was it, Terry, that was saying we shouldn't talk about going back but forwards. But anyway, returning to the building, using the building again, meeting in the building. How can we kind of celebrate that? Maybe share, you know, when we can, maybe shared meals. That feels like, you know, bring and share feels like still a ways off yet, doesn't it? But it'd be lovely to do that sort of thing. And one of the thoughts that we'd had is to on a Sunday encourage people to bring a picnic with them, and then go to the park afterwards, where we can sit and masks off and have a picnic together. Yeah. Joe's quite right. People are, yeah, some of our people, they get up, they're still in their pajamas, mug of tea in their hand. You know, it's a luxury that they're not going to get when we return to the building.
And as my wife said, Andy, if you're at home drinking coffee in your pajamas watching the service, you can also mute the sermon, which is a blessing.
Yep. Yeah, we have quite a bit of discussion about how long certain features should be, because if something's too long, that's the time to put the kettle on. Kim, did you have anything else to chip in?
I think because of our peculiar aspect to things in the Manchester diocese, that we've had families back in since the beginning of April because they want to get into school. Because we as a diocese, we have the largest number of Church of England schools and Church of England high schools, and parents are desperate to get their kids into those schools, and they're not taking up places for people who would have been in those spaces. That's the good thing about it. We have a small core of families who have actually been coming all along. Yes, they want to get their kids into school, but when I look out at the congregation, the families that I have at the moment, there are I think 6 families coming with their children, and of those 6, 4 are long-term attenders who've been coming to the church since I've been there, so nearly 7 years. So that's really encouraging, because they're still, they wanted to resume coming. And somebody said about how, you know, it's really, how tedious can this service be? There's no singing for the kids, you know, there's no movement, you know, they just sit in the pew. And of course, a lot of the older folk are like, that's how it's always been. That's the way it used to be. You used to just have to sit there and be quiet. So they're loving it, some of my old folk. They think this is wonderful. But I have to keep reminding them that this isn't how it's going to stay. Just because we are now at the moment all having to stay put, we can't, we're not supposed to move about in the church during the service, all of that. It's really, really difficult to work out a way of doing that. I've done live stream family worship on and off throughout lockdown, made sure it was really well really well advertised across the Facebook pages, and also in the schools, the primary schools. And so people have come along and joined in with that. But it's a huge question. How do we actually find a way forward in this time with our families and young people? We need to just, yeah, I like that idea. Yeah, definitely, Bill, I'm with you on that. Absolutely. Throw all the adults in the vestry and let the children worship. Here, here.
Jordan is asking, a real key question though there as well, isn't he? Jordan, encouraging people back to church suggests that online is an inferior version of church, and people are, we have learned in the past year. I mean, Eve and I used to spend quite a lot of our time saying, trying to counter that argument that talking to people online was some kind of inferior thing. And we used to say, this is real life. It is real. There's real people out there. It's just a different way of communicating with them. And that has become really inescapable over the past year, hasn't it? This is real connections, real people, real community. And the challenge to us is, how do we both do things in the building and stay connected with other people? Bill.
I mean, that's a massive point, and it's something that people in the disability world have been wrestling with for ages. And I think part of how we address that is about where we put our effort and where we put our resource. I'm very conscious, and growing more and more conscious all the time. I have people who really engage quite a lot in children's ministry because we believe children are important in the life of our church and they're fully part of the church. I need people engaged in online ministry in just the same way. My next door neighbor parish has got some funding to do this, but they've actually advertised for a social media pastor, for somebody whose job is going to be keeping in touch with people electronically and pastoring electronically. Now, there's all sorts of ways we can do that, and there's all sorts of options and things, but at the base for me is about saying, where do I think it's worth putting my resource in terms of time, in terms of people, in terms of assets and funding and all the rest of it? If online church is important, and if the people who engage that way are important, then they should have at least as much of that package as my children's ministry does, or ministry to care homes does, or whatever else it happens to be. And once we see it as ministry and mission, and a valid part of church life as much as anything else that we might do in the building, then that balance begins to come in. It does have to be a balance, but we've got to absolutely get the message across to people that being online is not an inferior version of being in the building. And this is not about being the poor relations or the also rans or whatever. This is about being fully part of what's going on, just engaging in a different way. And that's important, not just to, not just to disabled people or housebound people or whatever else, but all sorts of people. I've got folks now through the past year who are engaged in church here who live hundreds of miles away, and we've probably all had that experience. But they're engaging with us. That's a gift. That's wonderful, and they're part of the congregation. But they're never going to be physically in the building.
Wonderful. Yeah. Eve wants to chip in.
I just think this is absolutely true. I think Jordan asked a really good and, as he said, a deliberately awkward, probing question. And it's the difficult question that that people don't really want to address. But I think, as Andy said, we absolutely are not advocating here for how are we going to get everybody offline and get us back into the buildings. That is not the question at all. The question is, how are we going to find this perfect balance that works for us in our specific context, with the resources that we have, the people that we have, the finances that we have, the Wi-Fi that we have. How are we going to find a balance that works for all the different types of people that we need to serve? I heard somebody describe it in a webinar I attended as treating your online presence as a church plant in its own right, which I think is a really brilliant description. I was like, whoa, that's a great idea. And actually seeing the online space as a completely valid and unique place to be missional is really, really important. And the fact that we are going to be able to engage with people online, not just the people that we've already come across through our online services, but if we keep investing our time as churches, as Christians in the online space, that we're going to be able to make more and more of those connections. And that people, there are so many people now. We are living in a country where many people, I'm sure, on the census won't have ticked Christian as their faith. They'll probably have put none or agnostic or something. We are not getting people just walking through our church doors of their own volition. Of course, we'd love them to, and we will keep encouraging them to do so with everything that we can offer in the building. But we have got such an opportunity online as being that first shop window, if you will, into the world of the church and what we can offer, and what faith and a life of faith can offer to people. And by having fantastically welcoming social media presence, by having brilliant photographs on your website of all the lovely things that go on that make you the vibrant, unique place that you are, by sharing really interesting and difficult and grasping content that people can really get stuck into, and by offering welcome at every possible opportunity, we really can make these spaces missional, discipling spaces for anybody. And I mean, it gets very complicated with all the old finance and all that sort of stuff, but we've got methods to do online giving and support our parish work that way. I just think there's so much opportunity here. It's such a rich world that we're only just starting to tap into. So rather than seeing this point in time, which, you know, we hope is coming to the end of this horrible period of COVID, see it instead as this really new little bit of life that we've just started to nurture, this plant that we've started growing. And instead of it kind of fizzling out and dying and returning to what we always have done, we let what we've always done adapt and change and flourish in the way that it needs to, but also that we nurture this new little place that we've built for ourselves. I think that's hugely important and such an incredibly exciting opportunity for us.
Fantastic. Thank you, Eve. I'm going to wrap up because I think we haven't answered all the questions. There was a lot earlier on in the chat about things like copyright. Oh my goodness, yes. I mean, you can find that there is advice out there about copyright. It is complicated.
Join the digital support group. We've got lots of answers to those questions.
Ask the questions in those forums, and somebody will have researched it and will give you an answer. This is put together by Heartedge. There's lots of other online things. Heartedge has become, you know, we shifted into doing stuff like this fairly quickly, actually, in the pandemic. And I suspect that this isn't going to go away. I suspect that we're going to keep doing online seminars like this. So we'd love to hear your ideas about what you want to hear about. And Ben has put in the chat some of the things that are coming up, some really good quality stuff. One of the things that has happened is that we have access to really good quality speakers now, where we'd have had to travel somewhere before, but we can have them in our living room, which is great. I'm not meaning today as a good quality speaker, but hopefully you've got something from today. So I've really appreciated all that chat. So much good stuff there from you, all of you who've participated today. So thank you for sharing that. and yes, Morag, stuff there about the ministry of all believers. Absolutely. It's been fantastic to see the way people have all been joining in so many ways. I'm doing an online session next week about leading intercessions, because we've got new people who've been leading prayers because of the way that we do the pre-recorded video, and that's fantastic. You know, that people have joined in. It's so much good stuff that has happened this year, even though it's been terrible in many ways, and it's been really challenging in so many ways. But also we have got, you know, we have seen God at work, haven't we? And that's great. So keep up the good work. And I'm now waffling. I think we're going to go. There's always this awkward sort of leaving thing that happens now, but because I'd like to chat to well, I'm going to say publicly, going to say thank you to Bill and Eve and Kim and Ben behind the scenes. Thank you for your contributions today, which has been brilliant. And we're going to go. See ya.